In early medieval Europe, there was little that looked like modern policing. Order depended on neighbours, kin, and the local lord keeping watch because a village could not afford to ignore trouble. When someone broke a rule, the first question often was not how to investigate, but how to respond in a way everyone understood. Reputation mattered. Losing it hurt. Public shame worked because it used the community itself as pressure. This kind of justice moved fast and stayed close to home. A wrongdoer did not disappear into a distant system. They stayed in view, surrounded by the people they had to live with tomorrow. That closeness created a simple logic. If the community witnessed the punishment, the community absorbed the warning. Private penalties felt weak. Hidden penalties felt pointless. The lesson had to be shared, or it failed to control anyone else. So local authorities began to look for punishments that made wrongdoing visible on purpose. Not just pain, and not just a fine, but exposure. They wanted the act to follow the person like a mark, at least for a day, sometimes longer. A sentence started to mean more than a consequence. It meant a message delivered to the crowd. Justice became something performed in front of everyone because everyone was part of enforcing it. A new kind of punishment spread because it solved a problem officials faced again and again. People slipped away. The stocks did not rely on memory or rumour. They held the body in place. A board clamped around ankles, sometimes wrists, and a person stayed there for hours where everyone passed. It looked simple. It changed everything. Shame no longer followed someone. Shame waited for them. Because once the stocks appeared, punishment gained a schedule. The sentence did not just say someone did wrong. It told the town when to gather and where to look. A fixed spot became the official stage for disgrace, repeated week after week. The condemned could not turn away, could not walk off, could not hide their face from neighbours. Public judgment stopped being spontaneous. It became an appointment. That structure mattered. With the body locked down, time slowed, and every minute became part of the penalty. The crowd did not need to hunt the offender or argue about what happened. The authorities had already decided, and the device made that decision visible. People came knowing the person would still be there. In that certainty, humiliation turned into a predictable spectacle, reliable, communal, and hard to interrupt. The stocks held the body low and kept punishment close to the ground. Then a different machine appeared, and it changed the angle of shame. The pillory stood on a raised platform and used heavy boards to clamp a person in place. The head and hands stuck out through holes, fixed and unmistakable. It did not just restrain, it displayed. It announced the condemned as a public object. That height mattered. The platform lifted the face into the crowd's line of sight, where every stare landed directly. The locked boards forced the shoulders forward and kept the head steady so the person could not turn away or hide. Hands stayed out in front, helpless and visible, marking the body like evidence. The pillory made humiliation more precise. Not a person sitting in wood, but a face presented to be judged. And the design did something else. On purpose. It arranged the condemned as a target from every direction. People approached from the front, the sides, even behind, and the platform gave them easy access at eye level. The prisoner stayed trapped in the center of moving bodies, unable to defend, unable to retreat. In the stocks, shame surrounded you. In the pillory, shame confronted you, close enough for harassment to become physical. The pillory stopped being reserved for the most obvious troublemakers and started catching everyday offences. Petty theft did it. Small swindles did it. A person who shaved coins, sold short measures, or lied in a deal could end up locked in place for everyone to see. Courts treated these acts as threats to trust, the glue of daily life. So the response shifted toward exposure. The point became simple: make the wrongdoer visible. Then the net widened again. Moral crimes, adultery, prostitution, public drunkenness also fed the pillory, not because the device solved the behavior, but because it displayed it. It turned private shame into a public warning. Authorities used that moment to define what counted as acceptable. The sentence did not just punish the person, it labeled the act, and it told the crowd what to despise. Even words became punishable in wood and iron. Slander and false accusations brought people to the platform because speech could wreck reputations, marriages, and livelihoods. That made the pillory less like a penalty and more like a lesson acted out in real time. It ran on humiliation and it relied on an audience. The crowd did not just witness justice, the crowd completed it. By this point, the pillory rarely worked as a silent punishment. It worked as a signal. Once the person was locked in, the crowd understood it had a role to play, and that role went beyond watching. Jeers and insults came first, sharp and constant, meant to sting and stick. Then came the throwing. Filth from the street, rotten food from the market, anything close at hand that could humiliate on impact. Soon, the throwing stopped being symbolic. Stones appeared, not to mock, but to hurt. People grabbed whatever acted like a weapon, chunks of wood, loose bricks, handfuls of gravel, and aimed for the face and ribs. In some places, this behavior was treated as normal, even expected, as if the sentence included the crowd's hands. The punishment stayed public shame, but the public supplied the pain. That changed what a court order really meant. The officials decided the crime and set the hours, but the crowd decided the intensity. A person could survive one day in the pillory with little more than disgrace, or leave bleeding, blinded, or broken. No clear line separated lawful penalty from street assault. The pillory became a shared act, and responsibility spread out until it was hard to name who had crossed the boundary first. Officials tried to put limits around the pillory because by now everyone knew a crowd could turn dangerous. Sentences came with set hours, so the exposure ended before night or before the busiest moments. Guards got assigned, not to comfort the prisoner, but to keep the punishment from becoming a killing. Rules listed what people could throw and what counted as a weapon. On paper, it sounded like control. But those routines relied on the same crowd they tried to restrain. A guard could watch hands, but not every hand. A rule could ban stones, yet anything hard enough could get carried in unnoticed or picked up nearby. Even rotten food could blind, choke, or trigger panic. Once the prisoner was locked in place, officials had to manage a problem they had created, a target that could not escape. And the deeper failure was simple. The pillory looked like official permission. People did not read the fine line between humiliation and assault. They felt invited to take part. Each thrown object signaled that more was allowed, and the energy built fast. Guards stepped in, late or not at all, especially when the crowd seemed to act for the community. The system tried to regulate violence, and it kept slipping through. By this point, injuries stopped being an accident and became a known risk. A sentence in the pillory still sounded limited, even controlled. But once a person's head and hands stayed locked in place, the crowd decided what the punishment really meant. Stones cut skin, heavy blows broke teeth and bones. People got dragged, kicked and battered until they collapsed. The line between shame and harm kept thinning, and everyone saw it. Sometimes the violence went further than the court ever said out loud. A mob treated the pillory like a starting gun. The condemned got beaten unconscious, then beaten again when they could not defend themselves. Some got maimed for life, blinded or crippled in minutes. In the worst cases, the crowd killed. The death did not always look like an execution. It looked like punishment that slipped its leash and never got pulled back. That shift changed what the pillory meant. It no longer served only as community justice, where neighbours corrected neighbours. It became communal cruelty, shared and normalised in public. The person in the boards carried the damage long after the lock opened, if they survived at all. Families absorbed the fallout too, marked by fear and disgrace. And the crowd carried something as well. A lesson that pain could be entertainment, and that lesson lasted. By the early modern period, a shift began. Judges, city officials, and educated elites started to worry about what the pillory really achieved. The idea sounded simple: shame a person and others stayed in line. But the results looked messier. Crowds did not always learn restraint, they learned excitement. And every time a sentence ended in blood, the punishment looked less like order and more like entertainment. That doubt spread into courtrooms and council meetings. If a punishment depended on a crowd behaving well, then the state lost control the moment the prisoner was locked in place. The pillory exposed a problem that officials could not ignore. The sentence happened in public, but it did not stay lawful. The more violence followed, the more authorities faced a choice: defend the spectacle or reform it. Reform did not arrive all at once, but the direction changed. Sentences that once ended on the platform increasingly turned into fines, short jail terms, or other penalties that did not invite a mob. In some places, courts used transportation instead, removing the convicted person entirely rather than displaying them. The pillory did not vanish overnight, but its use declined as officials preferred punishments they could control from start to finish. Across Europe and in parts of the Atlantic world, governments started pulling the plug on public shaming as a legal sentence. Laws changed. Town officials removed the wooden frames from squares and crossroads, or they let them rot until nothing workable remained. The reason sounded simple: order. Courts wanted punishment that stayed predictable and controlled, and the old spectacle had done the opposite. It had invited crowds to finish the sentence themselves. At the same time, a different system grew faster and stronger. Modern police forces expanded and prisons multiplied, built to keep punishment out of view. The point was not to entertain a community, but to manage people through paperwork, cells, and routines. Punishment turned inward. Shame became less public, more bureaucratic, more sealed off. The street no longer served as the courtroom's stage. The state kept the body, and the crowd lost its official role. Still, the pillory did not vanish completely. It survived in fragments and echoes. Some remained as landmarks, no longer used, just reminders of what power once looked like. Others ended up in museums, labelled and fenced off, made safe by distance and explanation. And in rare moments, it returned as theatre. A prop for politics, protest, or symbolic humiliation. Not routine justice anymore, but a warning that the urge to shame never disappeared. By the present day, the pillory mostly sat behind ropes in museums or appeared in tourist photos, stripped of the power it once carried. But the idea underneath it never disappeared. People still got punished by being put on display. Only now the platform often became a post, a clip, a screenshot, or a headline. Shame no longer needed a carpenter and a town order. It only needed attention. Public exposure moved faster than any official process ever did. A mistake, an accusation, or a private moment could be pushed into view and shared again and again, until it turned into a kind of modern sentence. Outrage piled on because it felt immediate and righteous. Then came the step that echoed the old crowd most closely. Doxing. Names, workplaces, addresses, and family details got pulled into the open, inviting strangers to punish. The village square once limited the damage. You faced the people who lived near you, and the shaming ended when the hour ended. The digital crowd never had to go home. It gathered across time zones, multiplied by algorithms, and stayed focused long after facts blurred. Humiliation travelled farther than any medieval marketplace, and it followed people into their jobs, their homes, and their relationships. The pillory vanished, but the mob remained.